It started with a buzzing sound. Annoying, insistent, like a fly trapped in a room. I wasn't even awake at first, just drifting somewhere between dreams and reality. The sound pulled me back. Her phone, vibrating against the wooden nightstand. Not once. Not twice. A pattern. Someone was trying to reach her. Emily wasn't next to me. The sheets were cold. My first thought was the bathroom, but the light wasn't on. Then I heard movement, soft, careful. In the hallway. I pushed the blanket off and got up. The door was cracked open just enough for me to see her. She was standing by the kitchen counter, one hand gripping her phone, the other rubbing the side of her neck the way she always did when she was nervous. Her voice was low, urgent. No, not now. I told you, I'll handle it. A pause. Because it's not that simple, okay? I took a step forward and the floor creaked under my weight. She spun around so fast you'd think I'd caught her stuffing a dead body into the freezer. Her eyes widened. Then, just as quickly, her expression changed like a mask clicking into place. Calm. Innocent. But her grip on the phone tightened. You scared me, she said, forcing a small laugh. What are you doing up? I didn't answer. My eyes flicked to the screen of her phone. It was still on, but she tilted it away just enough for me not to see. Something inside me twisted. Who was that? I asked. Emily sighed, rolling her eyes as if I had just accused her of something ridiculous. Work. A client freaking out over some contract details. At 1 a.m? I didn't say it. Not yet. Instead, I just nodded slowly, letting the moment stretch between us. She shifted on her feet. Nervous. You should get some sleep, she said, moving past me. I smelled her perfume, too much of it for this late at night. I turned to watch her walk back to the bedroom, my mind already working, already putting pieces together that I didn't want to see. I let her think I believed her. But something was wrong. I just didn't know how deep the rot went yet. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Emily breathed steadily beside me, her back turned, her body wrapped in the same sheets I used to feel safe in. Now they felt like a trap. Like if I closed my eyes, I'd wake up tangled in something I couldn't escape. I needed air. I slid out of bed carefully, moving slow so the mattress wouldn't shift. My pulse was hammering, but I wasn't sure why. Maybe because deep down I already knew. Maybe because I wasn't ready to admit it yet. In the kitchen, I poured myself a glass of water, but my hands were shaking. I set it down and ran them through my hair instead. My mind was racing. That phone call wasn't work. That wasn't how she talked to clients. I'd heard her on calls before, professional, firm, charming when she needed to be. But this was something else. Something personal. I turned back toward the hallway, eyes landing on her purse sitting on the counter. Her phone was inside. I shouldn't. I had never been the kind of man who checked his wife's phone. It felt wrong. It felt desperate. But the way she had looked at me tonight, the way she had hidden that screen, something was off. And I needed to know. I stepped closer, heartbeat loud in my ears. Slowly, I reached for the bag, fingers brushing against the leather. I was just about to pull it open when a sound. I froze. Footsteps. No, not footsteps. Just the creak of the bed shifting. My head snapped toward the hallway. I listened. Held my breath. Silence. Had she moved? Had she woken up? My throat felt tight as I stood there, waiting. If she walked out now, what would I say? Would I lie? Would I admit what I was doing? More silence. Carefully, I unzipped the bag and reached inside, fingers closing around the cool surface of her phone. I pulled it out, my hands steady even though my chest was a mess. The screen was still locked. I hesitated. What now? If I tried to guess her password, I'd only have a few chances before it locked me out completely. I could wait until she was asleep again and use her fingerprint. Or I could, a vibration. My stomach dropped. A message. Right in front of me. Unknown number. I miss you already. The world tilted. I felt it happen. Like the ground had been pulled out from under me. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at those 4 words. Simple and devastating. My brain tried to reason with it. Maybe it was a friend. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe another message. Unknown number. Same time tomorrow? Everything inside me went cold. I gripped the phone tighter, the edges pressing into my palm. A sound built in my throat, something between a laugh and a choke. This was real. This was happening. I glanced back at the hallway. Still quiet. Still dark. I could wake her up right now. Demand answers. Shove the phone in her face and watch her scramble for a lie. But I didn't, because I wasn't ready to hear the truth yet. Not like this. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. I sat in the living room. Phone in my hands, the words burning into my brain. I miss you already. Same time tomorrow? There was no way to twist that into something innocent. No way to convince myself that it was a misunderstanding. The only question left was, who? I could have called the number right then and there. But if she had saved it under an unsaved contact, it meant she didn't want me to know. And if I called, whoever was on the other end would know something was wrong. They'd warn her. She'd cover her tracks. No, I needed proof. So I sat there, watching, thinking, planning. At 6 a.m., Emily's alarm went off. I heard her shift in bed, groan softly, then silence it. I didn't move. I was still in the chair when she walked out, her hair a mess, wearing one of my old t-shirts like she always did in the mornings. She rubbed her eyes. Then she saw me. "You're up early," she said, voice thick with sleep. I watched her carefully, waiting for something: guilt, hesitation, fear. But she was good. Too good. "Couldn't sleep," I said. She yawned, stretching her arms above her head. "Well, at least one of us got some rest." The casual way she said it made my skin crawl. I wanted to throw the phone in her face, scream at her, ask her how long she'd been lying to me. But I forced myself to stay calm. She didn't know I knew. That was my advantage. She walked over and kissed me on the forehead, a habit she had since we first got together. Only now it felt different. Tainted. She pulled back and smiled. "I need coffee." I followed her into the kitchen, watching as she moved, studying every detail. The way she hummed softly while pouring her coffee. The way she scrolled through her phone absent-mindedly. Was she checking for messages? Was she waiting for him to respond? She caught me looking. "What?" she asked with a small smirk. I shook my head. "Nothing." She sipped her coffee. "You sure you're okay? You look tense." I forced a smile. "Just a rough night." She pouted slightly, reaching out to squeeze my arm. "Maybe we should go out tonight. Just us. We haven't had a date night in a while." I almost laughed. Was this guilt? Or just another lie? "Yeah," I said. "That sounds nice." But I was already making plans of my own. By noon, I had a new burner phone. It was easy enough to get one. I picked it up from a store across town, paid in cash. I didn't want her or anyone else knowing what I was up to. When I got home, Emily was already dressed and getting ready to leave. "Got a client meeting," she said, grabbing her bag. "Shouldn't take long." I leaned against the doorframe, watching her. "Where?" I asked. She barely hesitated. "Downtown. At a coffee shop." I could see it in the way she avoided my eyes. She was good at this. Too good. She kissed me quickly. "Love you." And just like that, she was gone. I waited 5 minutes. Then I grabbed my keys and followed. I kept my distance, careful not to get too close. She drove across town, but not to a coffee shop. Not even close. She pulled into a hotel parking lot. I clenched the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went numb. She got out, checked her reflection in the car window, then walked inside. I sat there, heart pounding, every part of me screaming to go after her, to catch her in the act. But I didn't. Because I had a better idea. I grabbed the burner phone, took a deep breath, and typed a message to the number I saw last night. Same time. Room number? I hit send. And waited. 0.3 minutes passed. Then 5. Then 8. I sat in my car, phone in my hands, waiting. Watching the entrance of the hotel, my pulse hammering in my ears. I imagined her inside, slipping off her coat, running a hand through her hair, checking her reflection before walking toward whatever room he was in. I checked the phone again. Nothing. Maybe he was already inside. Maybe my message was too late. Maybe a buzz. I nearly dropped the phone. My hands were sweating as I turned the screen over, heart hammering. Unknown number, 312. Doors open. I let out a slow breath, staring at the numbers on the screen. That was it. That was all the confirmation I needed. This wasn't some mistake. Some misunderstanding. She was here. Right now. In room 312. I should have felt anger. I should have felt rage boiling under my skin. But instead I felt calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that felt unnatural, dangerous. I tightened my grip on the phone, took another deep breath, and stepped out of the car. The hotel was one of those business class places. Clean, modern, impersonal. The kind of place you booked when you didn't want to leave a trail. I walked through the lobby, keeping my head down, my hoodie pulled over just enough to hide my face from the cameras. Elevator or stairs? The elevator would be faster. But if she was leaving soon, I couldn't risk running into her. Stairs. I climbed quickly, taking 2 steps at a time. My body was on autopilot, my brain numb. Floor 2. Then 3. My fingers curled around the phone in my pocket as I walked down the hallway. The door was slightly open, just like the message had said. I stood there, breathing, listening. Voices. Hers. Low, sweet. Laughing. His deep, smooth, familiar. My stomach twisted. I should have walked in right then. I should have kicked the door open and let them both see me standing there. But I didn't. Instead, I pulled my own phone out and hit record. Then, carefully, silently, I pushed the door open just enough to see. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, leaning close to him, her hands on his chest, her smile easy, playful, nothing like the distant, distracted expressions I'd been getting for months. And him? I almost laughed. I knew him. Of course, I knew him. The kind of man people listened to when he spoke. The kind of man who could make or break careers with a single decision. And he was sitting there, grinning at my wife like she was the best thing he'd ever had. I recorded everything. The way she touched him. The way he pulled her closer. The way she looked at him like he was the only person in the world. That was the part that hurt the most. Not the betrayal. Not the lies. But the way she looked at him. I backed away, silent, careful. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I had all the proof I needed. I walked down the hall, down the stairs, out of the hotel, and back to my car. I sat there for a long time. Then, without a word, I drove away. I drove without a destination, my mind numb, my hands steady on the wheel. The city blurred past me, buildings, streetlights, cars honking in the distance, but I didn't really see any of it. My brain was stuck on one thing. One image. Emily. In that hotel room. With him. I had suspected. I had even prepared myself for the worst. But seeing it with my own eyes? Watching her lean into him, touch him, laugh with him? That was different. That was real. And him. Of all people, it had to be him. Mark fucking Reynolds. A name that carried weight. Influence. The kind of man who walked into a room and people suddenly straightened their backs. He was older than Emily by at least 15 years, a corporate powerhouse, always in the media for some business deal or another. I had met him once. A charity event. Emily introduced me. "This is my husband," she had said, smiling. Holding my hand. Pretending like we were something we weren't. And Mark? He had shaken my hand, looked me in the eye, and given me one of those firm, practiced grips. The kind that says I win. Always. How long had it been going on? How long had she been lying to me? I pulled into an empty parking lot and gripped the steering wheel, my breathing slow and controlled. The old me, the stupid, trusting me, would have gone home, confronted her, demanded answers. But now? Now I was playing a different game. I took out my phone, the one I had used to record them, and scrolled through the footage. I had about a minute's worth, enough to confirm everything, but not enough for what I had in mind. I needed more. I opened my messages, typed in the number from before, and hit send. Me, tonight? Same place? I didn't have to wait long. Unknown number, of course. 8 p.m. You know where to find me. I smiled. I went home before she did. When Emily walked through the door, she looked normal. Like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't spent her afternoon in a hotel room with another man. "Hey," she said, setting her purse down. "What have you been up to?" I shrugged. "Just running errands." She smiled, walking over to me, slipping her arms around my waist. "Did you think about our date night?" I looked at her. Really looked at her. There was no guilt in her eyes. No hesitation. Just lies. "Yeah," I said, smiling back. "Let's go somewhere nice." Her face lit up. "I was thinking Italian. That place downtown. Perfect." She kissed me then, soft and slow. If I hadn't known any better, I would have believed it. I would have believed every lie she had ever told me. But now? Now, I was just waiting for 8 p.m. Emily was glowing that evening. She took extra time getting ready, standing in front of the mirror, fixing her makeup, adjusting the dress she knew I liked. She looked effortlessly beautiful, the way she always did. But all I could see were her hands on him. Her lips forming soft smiles, the way she leaned into him, the way she laughed, free and unburdened. She had no idea. I played my part perfectly. Smiled when she smiled. Nodded when she talked. Acted like a man excited for date night with his loving wife. Inside, I was counting the minutes. She picked the restaurant. An expensive Italian place downtown with dim lighting, expensive wine, and couples holding hands across candlelit tables. The kind of place that made you feel like love was the only thing that mattered in the world. What a joke. We ordered wine. She talked about work, about how busy things were, about how she wished she had more time for us. I almost laughed. I let her talk. I let her believe she was in control. I let her sip her wine. Let her fingers brush against mine. Let her play the role of the devoted wife. And when the clock hit 7:45, I excused myself to the restroom. But I didn't go to the restroom. I stepped outside, into the cold night air, and pulled out my burner phone. "Me, I'm here. What room?" Took less than a minute. Unknown number. Same as before. 312. Perfect. I went back inside, slid into my seat, and smiled at Emily. Everything okay? She asked, tilting her head slightly. Yeah, I said, reaching for my glass. Just work stuff. She nodded, completely unaware that her whole world was about to come crashing down. By 8:15 we were finishing up dinner. By 8:30 we were driving home. And by 8:45, I was watching her from across the room as she changed into something more comfortable, still humming softly, still oblivious. She thought she had won. She thought she was untouchable. I sat on the edge of the bed, stretching, letting out a slow, satisfied sigh. Long day, I murmured. Think I'll take a quick drive. Clear my head. She turned to me, raising an eyebrow. This late? I shrugged. Just for a bit. You should get some rest. She hesitated, just for a second. But then she nodded. Okay, drive safe. I kissed her on the forehead and walked out the door. The hotel looked the same. The lobby was quiet, the air thick with the scent of fresh linen and expensive cologne. I didn't hesitate this time. I took the elevator straight to the 3rd floor, walked down the familiar hallway, and stopped in front of room 312. The door was slightly open, just like before. I stepped inside without knocking, my heart steady, my breathing calm. And there he was, Mark Reynolds, sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through his phone, a glass of whiskey in his other hand. His suit jacket was off, his tie loosened, but he still looked every bit the powerful, untouchable man the world saw him as. He didn't even look up right away. Didn't expect you this early, he muttered, taking a sip of his drink. I closed the door behind me. He frowned, looked up, and then, just like that, his whole face changed. His grip on the glass tightened. His body stiffened. Who the hell are you? I smiled. I pulled out my phone. And I hit play. The room was silent except for the sound of my phone playing the recording. Emily's voice. Laughing. Low. Intimate. The soft rustling of sheets. The unmistakable warmth in her tone when she spoke to him, the kind of softness I hadn't heard in years. And then his voice. Smooth, deep, full of confidence. You're unbelievable. You love it, she whispered back. Mark Reynolds' face drained of color. He didn't speak. Didn't move. Just sat there, the whiskey glass still in his hand, his body frozen as my phone played back his sins. I let it go on for another few seconds, just enough to hear Emily's quiet sigh, the way she leaned into him, the way the bed creaked when I hit pause. The silence stretched between us. Thick. Suffocating. Mark swallowed. He placed the glass down slowly, deliberately, as if making any sudden movement would shatter the illusion that this wasn't happening. How did you? I tilted my head. You left the door open. His jaw tensed. He exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face, his perfectly curated mask slipping just for a second. This is a misunderstanding, he muttered. I laughed. A low, humorless sound. Yeah? Help me understand then. He looked at me now. Really looked at me. Not just as some random guy barging into his hotel room, but as something else. A problem. A threat. You don't want to do this, he said, voice measured, careful. I can make this all go away. I smirked. That's so? You don't know who you're messing with. I took a step closer. He tensed but didn't move. No, I said, voice dropping, steady and calm. I don't think you know who you're messing with. His fingers twitched. For a second, I thought he might lunge, try to grab the phone, try to end this before it spiraled out of his control. But I was ready for that. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. He exhaled, rubbing his temples. What do you want? Now we were getting somewhere. I pulled up a chair and sat down across from him, resting my elbows on my knees, watching him like he was a puzzle I was slowly putting together. I don't want money, I said, leaning forward. I don't want an apology. And I sure as hell don't want an explanation. Mark clenched his jaw. Then what? I smiled. I want to watch her break. His brows furrowed. I tapped my pocket where the phone sat. She doesn't know I know. And you're going to help me keep it that way. His expression darkened. I stood up, walking toward the door. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to keep playing your part. Keep texting. Keep meeting her. Keep doing whatever it is you two have been doing. Act like nothing's changed. He stared at me, his fingers gripping his knees. And if I don't? I pulled out my burner phone and dangled it in front of him. Then this little recording goes straight to your wife. Your board members. Every single person who puts you on a pedestal and thinks you're untouchable. His lips pressed into a thin line. You think I care about my marriage? He said, voice low. I chuckled. No. But I think you care about your image. His eyes flickered. Just for a second. But I saw it. Good. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway, turning back one last time. You'll hear from me soon. Then I left. And for the first time in a long time, I felt in control. I drove home with a strange sense of clarity. It wasn't peace. It wasn't relief. It was something sharper, something cleaner. A kind of focus I hadn't felt in years. Emily had spent so much time lying, so much effort covering her tracks, thinking she was untouchable. She had convinced herself that I was just another blind fool. And now? Now, I was watching her from the other side of the mirror. When I walked through the front door, the house was quiet. The lights in the living room were dim, the soft hum of the dishwasher the only sound. Emily was curled up on the couch, a blanket wrapped around her legs, her phone in her hands. She looked up and smiled like a wife happy to see her husband home. I almost laughed. Hey, she said, stretching. How was your drive? Good, I said, locking the door behind me. Cleared my head. She nodded, patting the couch beside her. Come sit. Watch something with me. I hesitated just for a second. Not because I didn't want to, but because I needed to make sure I played this right. So I sat. She curled into me, resting her head on my shoulder. I missed you. I ran my fingers through her hair, soft, slow. Lies. Me too, I murmured. She let out a content sigh, her body warm against mine. I was thinking maybe we should take a trip, she said. Just us. Somewhere far. No work, no stress. Just you and me. I stared at her. She wasn't trying to fix our marriage. She wasn't trying to reconnect. She was trying to distract me. To keep me from seeing the cracks. That sounds nice, I said. She smiled, kissing my cheek. I'll start looking at flights tomorrow. And just like that, she settled against me, content. Relaxed. As if the past few months hadn't been built on nothing but deception. I let her rest against me. Let my fingers brush through her hair. Let her believe she was safe. But in my mind, I was already dismantling everything she had built. The next morning, I woke up before she did. I got out of bed carefully, moving slowly so she wouldn't stir. The sun hadn't fully risen yet. The bedroom still wrapped in early morning shadows. Emily's phone was on the nightstand. She was a deep sleeper. Always had been. I picked it up. The screen was locked, of course, but I didn't need to get inside. Not yet. I just needed to see something. I swiped down. Checked her notifications. Nothing. I placed the phone back exactly how it was and walked out of the room. She was careful. Too careful. But I was patient. And patience always won. At exactly 9 a.m., my burner phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. What do you want from me? I smirked. Mark Reynolds was nervous. I took my time responding. Let him sweat. Then finally I typed. We're going to make her think she's winning. You're going to keep seeing her. Keep texting her. Act like nothing is wrong. A pause. Then, unknown number, why? I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. Then I sent the last message of the morning. Because the higher she climbs, the harder she'll fall. Emily was playing a game she thought she had already won. That was her mistake. She didn't realize that the rules had changed, that the pieces on the board had shifted while she was too busy sneaking around in hotel rooms thinking she was untouchable. For the next few days, I let her think everything was normal. I let her wake up in my arms. I let her text him while pretending to be buried in work emails. I let her walk around our home wearing my t-shirts, sipping coffee, humming softly like she had no care in the world. She had no idea that her world was already cracking beneath her feet. Because I had everything. Every text she sent, every time she met him, every lie she told me, it was all documented. Mark, for all his power, for all his confidence, was now my puppet. He did exactly as I told him, sending messages, arranging meetings, keeping Emily trapped in the fantasy she thought she was living. I made sure she thought things were escalating with him. That he was becoming more attached. That she was pulling the strings. And then I set the final trap. It was a Wednesday evening when I made my move. Emily was in the kitchen on the phone, talking to someone about work. Or so she wanted me to think. I knew exactly who was on the other end of that call. She was telling Mark that she couldn't make it that night. That I had suggested a last-minute dinner and she couldn't say no without making me suspicious. She didn't know I was the one who had planned that dinner. I leaned against the doorway watching her as she ended the call. She turned and smiled at me like she wasn't lying straight to my face. Ready to go? She asked, grabbing her coat. I smiled back. Yeah. The restaurant was quiet, intimate. Candles flickered on the tables, low music humming in the background. Emily reached for my hand across the table, her fingers light, delicate. She was performing again, playing the part of the devoted wife. If I hadn't known any better, I might have believed it. But I did know better. Are you happy? I asked suddenly. She blinked, surprised by the question. Of course, she said, tilting her head. Why wouldn't I be? I studied her. No reason. Just thinking. She smiled, squeezing my hand. I love you, you know. I forced myself not to react. Instead, I just smiled back and said, I love you too. The biggest lie of the night. When we got home, I let her go to bed first. I told her I had some emails to send, but really, I was waiting for the message. It came exactly when I expected it to. Unknown number, she's texting me. She's worried I'm mad at her for canceling. I smirked. Emily thought she was controlling this. She thought she was balancing two lives, keeping both of us exactly where she wanted. But she was the one being played. Me. Tell her to meet you tomorrow. Somewhere important. Unknown number. Where? I thought about it. Then I typed, me, our house. A long pause. Then, unknown number. Are you insane? I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Mark Reynolds knew exactly what would happen if he refused. The next morning, Emily was different. Restless. She kept glancing at her phone, checking for messages. I pretended not to notice. She thought she was being careful, keeping everything in check. But when she got that text from Mark, I saw it happen. The slight widening of her eyes. The way she exhaled slowly, calming herself. The way she typed back quickly, shoving her phone away like nothing had happened. Like I didn't already know everything. She thought she was sneaking around. Thought she was going behind my back. But really, she was walking straight into my trap. The morning was quiet. Too quiet. Emily moved around the house like everything was normal, but I could feel the shift. There was a different energy to her. Something restless, something on edge. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, asked what my plans were for the day, all while keeping her phone within arm's reach like it was a lifeline. She thought she was smart, slipping away right under my nose. But she had no idea I had planned every second of this. At 3:45 p.m., she got a text. She glanced at me, quick and cautious, before picking up her phone and turning slightly away, like I wouldn't notice. I noticed everything. A few moments later, she let out a soft sigh, stretching her arms, forcing a yawn. God, I'm exhausted, she said, rubbing her forehead. I might go for a drive, clear my head a little. I almost laughed. She had been using that excuse a lot lately. Yeah, I asked, leaning back in my chair. Where to? She hesitated. Just for a second. Maybe the park, she said. Or the beach. I don't know, just somewhere quiet. I nodded slowly. That sounds nice. You want me to come? She froze. Her body didn't move, but I saw it in her eyes. The brief flash of panic. She recovered quickly, forcing a soft smile. No, it's fine. You have work to do, right? Yeah, I said. I do. She exhaled, relieved, and kissed my forehead. I won't be long. I smiled. Take your time. She walked out the door, got into her car, and drove off. And exactly 3 minutes later, I followed. She wasn't going to the park. She wasn't going to the beach. She was going home. Or at least that's what she thought. I had told Mark to pick the perfect time, mid-afternoon, when I was always working, when she felt safest lying to me. And Mark? He had followed my instructions perfectly. By the time I pulled into the street, she was already parked in front of the house, glancing around nervously before stepping out of her car. Her hands smoothed down her dress. Her shoulders straightened. She had no idea what was waiting for her inside. She walked up the front steps, knocked lightly, and after a few seconds, the door opened. Mark let her in. I waited. Then, after exactly 1 minute, I got out of my car, walked across the street, and stepped inside my own home. The moment I walked in, everything stopped. Emily was standing in the living room, facing Mark mid-sentence. She turned, saw me, and for the first time in our entire marriage, I saw fear in her eyes. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Mark shifted uncomfortably, looking between us like he had just realized what was happening. I shut the door behind me. Slowly, deliberately, Emily swallowed. What are you doing here? I tilted my head. Funny. I was about to ask you the same thing. She let out a nervous laugh. Too forced. Too shaky. Mark he. Spit it out, I said, my voice eerily calm. She looked at Mark like he could save her. But Mark was done playing hero. He just exhaled, shaking his head. I told you, he muttered under his breath. Emily's face paled. Told me what? I pulled my phone out, tapping the screen a few times. The recording played. Her voice. Mark's voice. The soft, secretive laughter. The bed shifting. The undeniable proof of her betrayal. Her entire affair laid out in crystal-clear detail. Emily's breath hitched. She took a small step back, her hands trembling at her sides. Where did you? I walked in on you, I said flatly. I saw everything. She stared at me, her mouth slightly open, her breathing shallow. Her voice cracked. She tried to compose herself. Why didn't you say anything? I let the silence stretch, watching her squirm, watching her brain try to catch up, try to piece together how long I had known, how deep I had gone. Then, finally, I spoke. Because I wanted to watch you destroy yourself. Emily's face crumpled. Her knees almost buckled. I didn't what? I snapped. Didn't mean to? Didn't think I'd find out? Didn't care enough to stop? Her lip trembled. She tried to reach for me. I stepped back. The rejection hit her. I saw it. Felt it. I love you, she whispered. Desperate now. I laughed. Actually laughed. She flinched. You don't love me, I said coldly. You love lying to me. She turned to Mark, eyes wild, searching for something to help and escape anything. But Mark? Mark just exhaled and ran a hand down his face. I warned you, he muttered. She whipped back to me. Please, she choked. We can fix this. We can, no, I said simply. She froze. I let out a slow breath, taking one last look at the woman I thought I had married. Then I walked past her, out the door, without another word. She called my name. Again. And again. And again. But it was already too late. Years later, there was a knock on my door. I almost didn't open it. But something made me. And when I saw who was standing there, I felt my stomach drop, because Emily was standing on my doorstep. And she wasn't alone. A little girl stood beside her. A little girl with my eyes.